All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Aaron Fox with KSB Community Wellness. So we have another great educational program tonight. Tonight is Find Your Path to Purpose, Dealing with Stress and Negative Emotions More Effectively. So no further ado, I'll kick it on to Tyler Stoll and I'll let him explain everything. Go ahead, Tyler.
All right. Hi, everybody. So let me share my screen real quick so everybody can see what I've got. All right. So I want to thank you all for being a part of this presentation tonight. So the name of the game tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about dealing with stress and negative emotions in a positive way, in an effective way. So the first thing that you might be wondering is, who's this guy and why is he talking to me? So just to kind of give you a heads up, so I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I am a certified alcohol and other drug counselor, and I've been in the field for about 14, maybe going on 15 years at this point. The majority of my work has been with adolescents over the past years, so I've been working with teens for a good long time. And then I've also done some inpatient substance use work, and I've also worked in small town schools to kind of help with that. So right now I am working at the University of Illinois College of Medicine with the National Center of Rural Health Professionals, or Rural Health Professions. And we're working on a project right now called Path to Purpose. And that is, I'll tell you a little bit more about the study in and of itself, maybe towards the end of the study or the presentation here. But for the time being, just kind of wanted to give you a heads up as to who I am and kind of what I'm doing here. So let's get on with it. So the first thing that I want to talk a little bit about is, what is stress? Because I think that most people have an idea of what stress is, but sometimes that can be hard to hammer down completely. So when I think of stress, I think of this cartoon. And I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Calvin and Hobbes, but it's probably one of my all-time favorite cartoons of all time. And really this whole cartoon in of itself kind of syncs up with what stress looks like in general. So if it's too small to read or you're having a time reading it, essentially it's just Calvin, the little kid, is going through a lot of different things, being told he can't do this, he has to do this, he can't, do the things that he wants to do. And then at the very end of it, it's his mom is, kissing him on the head and saying, "Good night, honey. Have a great day. Tomorrow's another big day." And then it's him sighing heavily because it's another day. So and that's really kind of the gist of what stress is. When it builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and there are multiple things that kind of are an issue, that's where stress usually becomes an issue for us. So really, stress in of itself isn't a terrible thing, but if it builds and it builds and it builds, it can have a really negative impact on a person. And really, it's not a matter of toughing it out or sucking it up or anything like that. The example I like to think of is a glass of water, and I'll use my own mug here to demonstrate. So really, when it comes down to think of this as kind of you, and your stress as kind of the water that's inside of it. So if something bad happens to you, it kind of fills up a little bit here, and maybe something else happens and it fills up a little bit here, or maybe if something huge happens, it fills up a lot. And it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds up until the point where it's at the tippy top. And then whenever something else happens and we haven't done anything to deal with that stress or to manage the stress in a good way, it comes out the top, spills all over the place. So that's something that we really have to kind of pay attention to. And really kind of the best way to deal with stress is just finding things that work for you, that kind of best manage that. Understanding how your own personal response is to stress is huge in that. Kind of understanding, if you know that you start to get kind of sore shoulders, or a stiff neck, or your heart starts to race when you're overstressed or something like that, those are really good signs to pick up on and to kind of keep tabs on. And there are good ways to deal with stress. There are also not so good ways of dealing with stress. we're going to focus mostly on some positive ways to deal with stress. And some of those not so good ways, those might be things like, using drugs or alcohol to deal with stress, or, indulging too much in an activity that may get in the way of you, kind of growing up and being the best person that you can be. But for the most part, we're going to focus on some of the good things. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what stress is. Really, the textbook definition of what stress is just, it's a feeling of emotional or physical tension. That's really what it comes down to. It's really your body's reaction to anything that might be harmful or challenging or demanding, or anything that might lead to kind of like a fight, flight, or freeze response. And those are kind of like those fight, flight, and freeze responses. Those are kind of like built into us. And that's kind of how we respond to most situations. And what the stress does is it's kind of like almost like our body's alarm system to say like, oh no, I got to do something different. And so, but the problem being is that doing that a little too much might create issues for you. In small doses, it's not bad. I mean, stress in of itself is not a terrible thing. However, if it's in a big dose over a long period of time, that's when it starts to impact kind of our feelings, our belief, like our emotions, our ability to think clearly, our physical health, things like that. And in the gist of it is that everybody handles stress differently. The symptoms of being stressed out really differs from person to person. My reaction to stress may be very different from yours, and that's okay. But it's really key is figuring out what exactly those symptoms are and how you deal with that stress, or what that stress looks like in your life. So as far as the physical symptoms are concerned, so some things that maybe you could look out for if you were struggling with stress or wanted to know, like, well, what are some things that maybe it's getting to be a point where it's too much. Things like having low energy, or having an upset stomach, or aches and pains, heart rate issue, like increased heart rate, maybe chest pains if it gets to the point where it's too much. Maybe you're not sleeping well. Maybe you find that you're getting sick a little more frequently. Or maybe you're grinding your teeth or clenching your jaw in your sleep. And really, the physical symptoms of stress can create a lot of wear and tear on the body. And if it goes for long enough, it can actually do some damage. I've seen folks that have worn their teeth down a little bit because they clench their teeth in their sleep or so much. So it's really something to pay attention to. As far as emotional symptoms of stress, this can range for a lot of different areas. So that might look like worrying, like we worry a lot about the future, or what's going to happen to us. Our thoughts might start to race, where we're not necessarily thinking as clearly or making as good choices as we should. Feeling agitated, so just kind of getting frustrated with people, or you're quick to snap at somebody if you're feeling stressed out. Feeling bad about you, loneliness, worthlessness. I mean, there's a lot of different symptoms that can go along with that, and you'll find that the more stressed out that you get, the more struggle there is with kind of finding better ways to manage it. Think of it in terms of like a snowball starting at the top of a hill and kind of like rolling downhill. It can get to be a lot like pretty quick, and so it's something to definitely pay attention to. The reason for that being is that a lot of the symptoms that we're talking about here can turn into something a little bit more, whether that be depression or anxiety. So what kind of things cause stress? Like I said, it really differs from person to person. There's such a thing as good stress and bad stress. And good stress can fall into anything that is like, big life experiences that might be really good for us. Maybe, getting a new job, or having a baby, or having, children in your life. I mean, even something like riding a roller coaster can be huge. I mean, it can stress us out. It can be a little scary, but all in all, like sometimes we really enjoy that stuff. On the flip side of that, bad stress is the kind of stress that keeps us off guard, like catches us off guard. We're not ready for it. Things that require immediate attention, like we have to kind of drop everything and deal with a crisis that happens to us. And some of those things might include being laid off, or a divorce, or a breakup, or having a baby or children. Sometimes can be bad stress in of itself. If there are any parents in the audience that have had many sleepless nights, that sometimes that can be bad stress. And really, too much stress in general can be bad stress. Even too much of a good thing, even if you are, trying to manage a new job on top of a new relationship, on top of trying to meet new people in your area, or anything like that, like those things can stack up and they can wear us out pretty quick, depending on how we manage stress to begin with. So how can we deal with stress? I think that's a big piece. And really, it really starts with your perspective. The way that most people kind of manage stress and manage their thoughts and things like that, usually something will happen. There will be some kind of a thought that goes along with that, and then there's a feeling that accompanies that. So, like for instance, I get cut off while I'm driving to work. A rational thought might be like, "Wow, that guy's really in a hurry." And then a rational feeling was like, well, I didn't really appreciate that. That kind of frustrated me a little bit, but it's fine. I'm not going to let it get to me. Whereas, if you're starting to have distorted thoughts, that can lead to distorted feelings. So like, let's say somebody cuts me off, and my first thought is that I'm going to follow this person and I'm going to beat them up, and that's going to be the end of it. And really, what that can do is that can lead to kind of some of those distorted feelings, where maybe like the feelings that accompany that is just anger and rage, and just like, putting yourself in danger, or putting, the other people, if there are any other people in the car with you, putting them in danger, or whatever the case is, because you kind of get like vapor lock on this one thing, and that is not good for you either. So really, one of the key things of dealing with stress is really noticing some of the thoughts that happen to us. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about this. I'm just kind of leaving it up there so that you guys can see some of the examples of some of those and what they might be. And if you look at any of these cognitive distortions, is what they're called. I call them Stinkin Thinkin because it's easy to remember and it's clever. Maybe not super clever. I think it's clever. But really, the gist of it is that we tend to think in a certain way, and we fall into kind of different thinking patterns. And by doing that, we tend to draw certain conclusions, and those conclusions can sometimes hurt us depending on how it is that we think. So really, the best way that we can kind of deal with this whole perspective thing is really to take a step back and think about, like, okay, is this really, like, is this helpful? Is this really the way that I want to approach this? Is this going to matter, months from now? Is this really something to kind of, is this a hill worth dying on, so to speak? And some of these might be like overgeneralization, where it's like, because this is how it worked in the past, this is how it should always work, or this is how it will always work. So just because, I didn't get along with my first grade math teacher, every other math teacher that I have is going to hate my guts. Or maybe like, because I feel mad, or because I feel dumb because I'm not good at math, I am dumb in general, might be another one, where it's easy to kind of fall into those ruts in thinking, and it's easy to get stuck because of them, because we kind of start to beat ourselves up over some of the feelings and some of the emotions that kind of go along with that. So really, in terms of changing perspective, and that's ultimately kind of one of the main things that we're trying to do. Um, how we think about and how we interpret all of this information that comes to us throughout the day will play a big role in how we manage it. And changing the negative thinking is going to help us to look at situations from a different perspective. Um, so one of the things, like for instance, let's take for example my struggle with my math teacher in first grade. So I had a terrible experience with math, and I hate every teacher that ever comes my way as far as math. And let's say that I am now in 10th grade, and I still to this day do not like my math teacher. So one of the questions I might ask myself is like, well, I hate my math teacher. My math teacher hates me. Well, what's the evidence for this? How do I know that the math teacher hates me? Is it possible that maybe I'm blowing some of their behaviors towards me out of whack? Am I exaggerating it in any way, shape, or form? Is there a possible other interpretation for why the math teacher might give me the stink eye every now and again? Um, you know, is the event that happened with my teacher today, is that going to matter in a week, a month, a year? If will I be okay, essentially, if this situation is true, or if nothing changes? Like, in the event that the teacher does, something rude and I take it as kind of mean, am I going to get over it? Is it something that I can let go and I can deal with differently, or is it something that I'm going to kind of chew on for a long period of time? And really, it's the ultimate goal is to really challenge your thought process and challenge your thinking in finding a better way of managing that situation. And to do that, there's this little diagram, and it may look pretty intimidating at first, but it's really, really helpful as far as kind of better managing some of those thoughts and feelings. So what you're seeing here, this is kind of like a flowchart of how to examine thoughts and how to find better ways of dealing with thoughts. So you start with something called an activating event. And what that is that is just your, your situation, what it is that's stressing you out, what you are struggling with kind of in general. And then there's the whole belief piece. And what the belief piece focuses on is when you think of when this event happens to you, what is your first knee-jerk reaction to it? That might be like, if the guy cuts you off, that guy's a jerk. Or it may be like you look a little bit deeper and you look at like, okay, why do I feel this way? Well, it makes me feel sad because I don't like being disrespected, and that guy cutting me off, he was really kind of disrespectful to me. And so by doing that, you kind of gonna get an understanding of why it is that you feel the way that you feel, and that's huge. When you can start to understand the beliefs and kind of understanding the why of how you feel the way you feel, then you can start to change the consequences of that too. And so what your consequences are essentially is like, what's the good outcome? What's the bad outcome? I mean, all of our actions, all of our behaviors, they have consequences of some kind. And really it comes down to it's kind of a balancing act in some ways. What I had for breakfast can have good and bad consequences. It may be that that bowl of cereal was actually pretty, it was pretty tasty, but it was like half sugar, so maybe it wasn't so good for me. And so that has good consequences and bad consequences. Going back to the belief piece and challenging your thoughts, that's where the 6 questions come into play. And so that's where, like, these questions that are here, let me see, there we go. These questions here come into play. So once you come up with the whole belief, then you can ask yourself those 6 questions that kind of come into play. So again, if I'm having a hard time with my math teacher, and my belief is that my math teacher is a jerk, and then I look at a little like, what's driving this underlying belief? Well, I don't really feel very good like doing math. Like I feel like I'm pretty dumb when it comes to doing math. Okay, well, that gives us kind of what that underlying belief is. And maybe that's a source for why we don't like our math teacher all that much. And so from there, you can start to challenge that. Like, so what's the evidence for me not being good at math, for my math teacher hating me? And you can really start to kind of like pick apart all those different pieces and maybe come to a different outcome. So once you've gone through all of that and you're looking at you're looking at the situation through the lens of these 6 questions, you can really start to figure out, like, are the thoughts that I'm having unrealistic or not? And that can go one of 2 ways. And so if you do see that it's an unrealistic thought, maybe it's a matter of finding a positive counter thought. And what a counter thought is essentially just it's a thought or a statement that's kind of grounded in reality that kind of takes a different perspective. So an example, again, let's go back to the math one. A positive counter thought for that might be like, well, I'm not the best at math, and I know that I'm kind of weak in the area that's math, but I know that I can do better, or I can maybe get tutoring to help and try to help strengthen me in doing math. On the other side of that, if you are just bound and determined, and yep, that is 100% a realistic thought, and I am not happy camper with my teacher. Okay, well, from there, it becomes problem solving and finding a better course of action. And kind of what that might look like is just like trying to brainstorm different ideas as far as how you can handle different situations that come up. So like if the math teacher gives me the stink eye again, how am I going to deal with that so I'm not getting kicked out of class? Is kind of like, what can I do to best handle myself? And we'll talk a little bit about some ways of like kind of dealing with some of that stress, but that's a big piece of this too, is that in the event that, you know, these thoughts are the real deal and there's no way of kind of thinking your way out of it, you got to find a different way to deal with it in a more positive way. So one of the things that I think is really helpful, coping skills. And really finding proper coping skills that work for you is going to be huge. And it's going to best help you as far as managing your daily stresses that happen. A few things that are really important to remember about coping skills is that practice makes perfect. And it's one of those things that you have to keep working at it and you have to keep trying things. And once you find something that does work for you, stick with it. If it doesn't work one time, don't just drop it like a bad habit. Like, keep trying. See if it helps in maybe certain situations, or maybe there are different perspectives that you can take and try it in a different setting. Like having a stress ball sometimes can be really handy. And maybe at home, a stress ball doesn't do you any good at all, but maybe if you're at work, just you're not able to like listen to music or go take a walk if you're angry. Maybe having that stress ball in your pocket and just being able to squeeze it a little bit throughout the day whenever you're feeling a little itchy, that may not necessarily be a bad thing. So maybe you have to find the right situation for it. One size does not fit all when it comes to coping skills. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you, and that's okay. And that comes down to, you got to find what works best for you. When you do find find a coping skill that's helpful, think about why. Why is it helping you? And really, you can probably find more coping skills that are very similar to the one that's working for you if you focus on what it is that's so helpful about it. So like, if deep breathing is really helpful for me, where I just kind of like take a deep breath and just kind of cool down a little bit, and I find that super helpful. You might find that maybe whenever you get worked up or stressed out, you don't necessarily think about why it is that you're stressed out. Maybe you're going too fast. And so understanding that, like, well, when I breathe, it helps me to like slow down a little bit. Well, maybe you can focus on things that help you slow down and kind of take a step back and just kind of chill for a second and then come back to whatever it is that's bugging you. One thing that I'd have to note, coping skills are not a fix-all. They're meant to be kind of a distraction whenever your emotions are super high. However, if you deal with every situation with a coping skill and you don't actually deal with the problem, then nothing's going to get fixed, and that same problem's probably going to come back over and over again. And so it's really important to focus on trying to figure out a best way to deal with the situation after you've calmed down using a coping skill. And then, and of course, I think and this is the main thing, is just never give up. I think that's really a big piece of it. If you're working with a coping skill and it's not working, and you've given it kind of the old college try, and you've tried as best as you can, try something else. But don't just assume that nothing is ever going to work for you ever again. So another thing that is really handy can be setting goals. And I've found that this works really well as far as like if you're feeling anxious about certain situations, this can be really huge, just because it's one of those things that if you are dealt with a situation that's just like too much to handle, sometimes breaking it down into smaller pieces can make it a lot easier to deal with. There's an old saying that goes, "How do you eat an elephant?" And you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And that's kind of the whole idea with setting goals, is that instead of tackling everything with one go, we're focusing on just trying to kind of divide and conquer and try to find like little workarounds to certain situations so that it's not as big of an issue for us. And really the key to making goals is being, there are a few, I guess, lessons or guidelines when you make goals that are super handy. So like being specific. So this means being simple and clear about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Making sure that the goal is measurable. So like we'll talk about kind of an example of how to set goals here after we're done talking about this. But if you're thinking of anything specifically as we're going through this that you're trying to work on, then finding a measurement for your own progress can be really good. The trick with this is to make sure that you can actually achieve your goal. So if your goal is to, I want to be able to run, a mile in 7 minutes. I want to just, get her done. Well, if you run a mile in 20 minutes right now, you might want to take baby steps. You might not want to necessarily start with trying at 7 minutes, because you're going to get frustrated and you might quit because you're just frustrated that you're not meeting your goal. Making sure that the goal is result focused. So like kind of making little like goalposts. Like if you're thinking about football, think of this as far as like that 10-yard chain, where you're able to kind of use it as a measurement stick. You're not going all the way to the to touchdown. You're focusing on little increments here, little increments here, little increments here, to kind of see how things go. And really give yourself a time limit. Give yourself a good amount of time, but don't give yourself too much time, and don't give yourself too little time to complete it. But sometimes that can give you a little bit of an extra oomph, a little bit of extra push as far as getting this thing accomplished. If you know that you have to get this thing done by a certain time, you're going to try to make it a priority, maybe, where you're trying to focus a little bit more on making it happen and trying to do something different for you. So an example of setting goals. So let's say that I want to lose weight. So first thing we're going to do, what is your goal? Well, my goal is going to be, I want to lose 10 pounds by the end of the month. So by using this goal, I've been able to, one, give myself a certain amount that I'm looking to lose, and I've given myself a time frame on how I'm going to do it. And it's achievable too, which is pretty good. I think 10 pounds by the end of the month is doable. So how will you complete this goal? So I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. Okay, that's pretty good. Again, I've got a measurement. I'm able to mark on a piece of paper how many times I go to the gym in a week, and I'm able to kind of pay attention to um, the outcomes of that too. So okay, so we've our goal is then we're going to hit the gym 3 times a week. How are we going to make that happen? And this can have 1 or 2 or 7 like little like mini goals to it. Maybe that's something like I'm going to bring a bag with me and I'll leave it in my car, or I'll leave it in my locker on the days that I'm going to go to the gym, just to make it easier, because I know that whenever I go home to get changed to go to the gym, usually I don't want to leave home. I just want to hang out at home. Or maybe the mini goal is I'm going to make this a priority, and I'm going to put it in my calendar. And so I've got it looking at me in the face, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if that's when I decide to do it. And it's really making sure that you kind of carve out the time throughout the week in order to make that happen. So maybe another part of that goal is I'm going to make a point to lessen how many sweets that I eat every day. So like maybe my goal is I'm going to eat 1 less piece of candy every day. So in order to do this, maybe that looks like I'm going to drink water to whenever I'm feeling like I want to eat something sweet. I'm going to drink some water to hopefully kind of combat some of that feeling. Or maybe I'm going to eat a piece of fruit or a vegetable or something like that if I'm really craving eating some candy. So again, like, we're making sure that it's doable. We're making sure that it's measurable. We're making sure that it is something that we can actually stick to and complete. So and one of the other tricks to all of this is acceptance. And some of y'all might have heard this before as far as what it is, but acceptance is, I mean, essentially stuff happens in life. Sometimes there's not a whole lot that we can do about it. And sometimes the only thing that we can do is just kind of acknowledge that, yeah, something bad happened. And we just kind of have to find a better way of managing the situation. A lot of acceptance comes from kind of making sure that, like, if the situation makes you angry or it makes you sad or something like that, it's okay to feel the feelings. Like, you're more than okay to deal with the feelings however you feel you need to deal with them. But just make sure that it's not hurting yourself or somebody else in some way, shape, or form. But sometimes, just like, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad and cry, or to kind of scream into a pillow if you need to. I mean, whatever the case is, but making sure that you actually feel those feelings, you don't just kind of stuff them down. That's huge, because a lot of times whenever we stuff those emotions, kind of like going back to our glass example before, when we stuff the emotions, there's nowhere for it to go. So it's like, we may be down here, we might have stuffed down a little bit here, but it's still, I mean, a little bit more stress is just going to add to it and add to it. So, I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when you're going to pop. One of the things that acceptance is not is giving up. When people say, you just need to accept that this is how it is. Well, I mean, to an extent, yeah, you have to accept that there's not so much that you can do as far as controlling them or the situation, but it's not just giving up. It's about doing damage control, essentially, and finding better ways to kind of help you or to deal with situations that you have to deal with. And that's really kind of the key piece of acceptance, is just like understanding and not dwelling, but finding something new that you can do to kind of better deal with the situation. And I think really there's an old saying that I used to talk with my kids about whenever I worked in inpatient. There are 3 things that you have no control over: people, places, and things. And that the only thing that you do really have control over is you. That's the only thing that you have control over. And really the more time you spend focusing on the things that you can control versus the things that you can't control will make you a happier person in general. Because I used to use the example of if I'm taking a walk and I want to, there's a mountain in front of me, it's going to be way easier for me to either find a path through the mountain or go around the mountain than it is to try to move the mountain out of my way. And that's kind of what I think we run into a lot of with situations in our lives where we have this tendency to focus a lot on other people and things in our life that we can't necessarily control, and we get super worked up about it. But in reality, there isn't much that we can actually do to deal with it. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that acceptance is a huge piece to kind of better dealing with stress. And you're going to notice that when you start to focus on how can I change me versus change this person or this situation at work or something like that, you're going to find that you might be a little less stressed out because you're doing things that you actually have control over. So I hope that was kind of helpful to you. And now I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about the study that we're doing, because it dovetails really well with everything that we've talked about here. And some of the stuff that I've talked about here is actually in the study. So if this is a topic that you feel like has been really helpful to you, or you are interested in learning more about, there might be, maybe you want to be a part of the study actually. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But so the study that I'm actually working on is something called the Path to Purpose study. And really what it comes down to is we're looking at kind of how to best deal with stress or anxiety, or depression, or whatever you want to say. But basically what it comes down to is it's dealing with stress and negative feelings in a more appropriate way. And that's kind of what our main goal is as far as like what we're trying to accomplish. So the project that we're working with, or the institute that's kind of helping us with the study right now, is a group called PCORI, and that stands for Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, which is a lot. So it's a lot of words. But really, if you think of PCORI as this, essentially they help with clinical effectiveness and making sure that the work that we're doing is helping the community, and that it helps people that that our research is focused on better make good decisions when it comes to dealing with some of the kind of struggles that come with dealing with mental health issues. And really, to do this, we talk a lot with the community. We talk a lot with different, like the schools. We talk with, mental health folk. We talk with church folk. We talk with businesses. We try to work with a lot of different people to try to understand kind of the perspective and the different struggles that maybe are in the community, or maybe what's the best way to approach a certain situation or things like that. We also have we have two advisory boards. So the first advisory board is the community advisory board, and that's your folk from the schools and businesses and mental health places and things like that. The other one is a teen advisory board, because we want to make sure that our focus is on teenagers, and we want to make sure that the work that we're doing is actually helpful. It's centered on them. It's relevant. It's useful to them. And so we want to try to get their information and really get their feedback and kind of use them as kind of a fountain of knowledge, so to speak, and to make sure that we're doing the right thing and that we're doing right by the community and by our target audience. So as far as the study itself, we're examining the effectiveness of two different interventions. So one is like group therapy, and that's like teens achieving mastery over stress. We call it the TEAMS approach. The other one is competent adulthood transition with cognitive behavioral interpersonal training, or we call it the catch it because it's way easier. And really the gist of that is that both of these interventions, both of these ways of dealing with stress and with negative feelings are both very similar in the way that they do it, but there are a few key differences. So some of the things that both of these are based in cognitive behavioral therapy, and essentially that's a lot of some of the stuff that we've talked about tonight, as far as like changing your thinking so that it changes your own behavior. So if you go back to that giant flow chart thing that I showed you, that comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's just finding a better way of kind of dealing with situations and looking at the way that you think about it and the way that you react to certain things. So as far as the study is concerned, it's our two main folk that kind of help with the study are Dr. Ben Van Voorhees and Dr. Tracy Gladstone. And Dr. Van Voorhees works in Chicago with, he's actually like the big boss as far as pediatrics is concerned for University of Illinois. And Dr. Gladstone is kind of like a clinical psychologist who, and both of them are kind of the what we call primary investigators, and they're really kind of the top people, or the big bosses, I guess, so to speak, that are really helping us with kind of guiding the study. So essentially the goal of the study is to find an effective evidence-based intervention. We really want to try to compare these two, so the teams and the catch-up, we want to compare these two and really find something that's that we can use in a lot of different settings. So we want to find something that we can use that works in schools, in clinics, in any place that might deal with, you know, kids that might be struggling a little bit with stress or negativity or anything like that. And also, I mean, ultimately our goal is we want to try to make this so that it's available in as many communities as possible. The study itself takes place in a lot of different places. We have, in Illinois, we have 3 different sites. There's one in Chicago, one in the suburbs, and then there's one out in the rural area, which is kind of what I handle. I'm the program manager for the rural area. And then we also have sites in Boston, and we have a site at the University of Louisville as well. So it's a big study that has a lot of different places and a lot of different people, and ultimately we're trying to find kind of the best fit for multiple places so that we can kind of apply as much as we can. And really, we are including, you know, different patients, the community, healthcare experts. We kind of turn to you all as the experts as far as that's concerned, and that's why we have the advisory boards. That's why we do some of this outreach stuff, so that we can get ideas or thoughts or get a different perspective, and just make sure that we're trying to help people as much as we can. So to kind of give you a quick rundown as far as teams versus catch it. So the teams approach, which if you remember is group therapy, that's kind of the gold standard. It's considered the kind of the go-to for dealing with lots of people at once, for depression or anxiety or whatever your struggle might be. There's a long period of time that people do teams for, or that do group counseling for, and so you get better results the longer that you're doing therapy for, because I mean it gives you more time to kind of talk about what you're doing and how you're applying things and kind of troubleshoot some of the struggles that you might be having. And these groups are also done online or in person. There's kind of there's definitely an interpersonal piece to it where you're talking with a real live person and not a video recording or something like that. The bad thing about this approach, though, is that there's a lot of time commitment. There are a lot of sessions that kind of go along with that to make sure that it works well. There's a low cultural acceptability where it may not necessarily translate as well to different cultures. It's very focused on kind of white person culture, and so it may not necessarily translate as well to other different areas. And then there's also the high implementation cost, which just means that like you have to find somebody and pay them to kind of implement the study and to be a part of the study, and you have to find a place to do it. And there's just lots of things that probably cost a little bit of money here and there. With the Catch It, we're finding that this is a completely done online program, where we're trying to see if we can develop this into something maybe a little bit more moving forward. And the Catch It has a good evidence of scalability, like it can be applied to lots of different cultures, and it can be helpful. The time commitment to it is relatively low. It's kind of go at your own pace, and there's next to no implementation cost since it's done online. You just have to make sure that you have a working internet connection. The problem with that, though, is that because it's so new, we're still kind of testing it out, and we're still trying to find a better way of dealing with the situation. The other piece of that is that there really isn't a whole lot of interpersonal contact when it comes down to it. Because you're doing it all online, and you're kind of going at your own pace, you don't necessarily have that person that you're looking to talk to, or that you may need to talk to. But there are other systems in place that we're working on to try to manage that. But that's definitely a drawback to it as well. So as far as the study, what you need to know, the study itself is for any teenagers that are 13 to 18 who may be struggling with stress and maybe want to learn a little bit more as far as tools to help. The study itself teaches a healthy way of facing some of those challenges that you may meet in life. So that might include negative thoughts, managing conflict with friends and family, or maybe how to deal with a major life change that comes your way. The program itself also has a parent piece, and it helps parents to learn a little bit more about like kind of what the teens are learning about in the study and kind of what steps that they can take to promote their teens' well-being, which is another really nice piece of the study as well. As far as like information, if you do want to be involved in the study, it's private, it's confidential. We're not going to leak any information to anybody. Really what's said here in the study stays in the study. The study itself lasts, like the participation lasts about 18 months. And you'll notice that like as you spend more time doing the study, you have to spend less time doing it. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be working on kind of comes up first, or a lot of like the important stuff comes first, and then after that it kind of trails off a little bit. So you might find that you have a little bit more time as time goes on, because I know 18 months can be kind of scary. But again, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You're free to withdraw from the study at any time. So even if you're, we got you enrolled and you're all ready to go, that if you're just not feeling it, or if it's something you want to change, I mean, all we ask is that you just let us know kind of your reason for it, and we'll let you go. And then there's also compensation for your time and effort if you do meet the requirements for the study. So that's another nice piece, I suppose. So I want to use this time just to talk with you all a little bit as far as questions that you may have about the study, or any of the other things that I've talked about today, or if you have questions, or maybe I wasn't clear on anything. I just want to see if there's anything specifically that you all have questions on. And if you're interested in the study, we've got a few different ways that you can reach us. On there, we have our phone number, and we have our email address, and we have a website, and then we're also involved in social media as well. So there are lots of different ways that you can get a hold of us if need be. So if you have any questions, I am happy to hear them.
All right. Well, I don't see any questions for you, Tyler, but thank you for presenting tonight. A lot of great information. If you do have any comments and questions afterwards, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Private message us, and we'll make sure we can get those answered for you. We'll also be posting an evaluation in the comment section too, so let us know what you thought of the presentation tonight also. Again, thank you for joining us. Have a
Yep.
good night.
Thank you.